The first explosion came at dawn. Colonel Nathan Price was drinking his morning coffee when the alarm tore through Outpost Kestrel. The cup shattered on the floor as he ran toward the command center. Through the reinforced windows, he could see ships falling from the sky like burning meteors. They were not human ships. "Report," he shouted as he entered the room. Lieutenant Amy Cross looked up from her console with fear in her eyes. "Sir, we have 47 enemy vessels in orbit. They're dropping troops on the eastern perimeter. We count over 3,000 soldiers on the ground and more coming." Nathan felt his stomach tighten. Outpost Kestrel had 300 soldiers. 300 against thousands. "Get me a channel to Earth," he ordered. "Communications are jammed, sir. They hit our relay satellites first." Nathan looked at the tactical display. Red dots were spreading across the map like a disease. The Vorathi Dominion had finally made their move. For months, the alien empire had been testing human borders. Small raids, probing attacks. Now they had come in full force. "All units to defensive positions," Nathan said into the base-wide channel. "This is not a drill. We are under attack. Protect the civilians at all costs." Sergeant Lisa Brennan heard the order as she ran through the residential sector. Around her, families were screaming and rushing toward the emergency shelters. She grabbed a young mother who had frozen in terror. "Move! Get to the tunnels, now." Lisa had served 3 combat tours on different worlds. She had seen death many times, but she had never seen an invasion force this large. The Vorathi were not here to raid. They were here to conquer. Private Danny Vaughn was shaking as he took his position behind a concrete barrier. He was 20 years old. This was his first deployment. He had joined the military to pay for college, never thinking he would actually fight. "Steady, kid," said the soldier next to him. "Aim for the center mass. They go down just like anything else." Danny nodded, but his hands would not stop trembling. Then he saw them coming. The Vorathi were tall and covered in dark scales. They moved fast on 4 legs, their upper bodies rising like serpents. Each one carried a weapon that glowed with blue energy. Their eyes were yellow and cold. They looked at the humans the same way a hawk looks at mice. The first wave hit the eastern wall. Danny fired his rifle. He saw a Vorathi fall, then another. But for every one that dropped, 10 more took its place. The barrier next to him exploded, and the soldier who had given him advice disappeared in a flash of blue light. Danny screamed and kept firing. Ambassador Claire Whitmore was in the command center when the first wall fell. She was not a soldier. She was a diplomat, sent to oversee peaceful relations with neighboring species. Now she watched as peaceful relations died in fire and blood. "We need to evacuate," Nathan said to her. "The mining tunnels. They go deep into the moon. We can hold there." "For how long?" Claire asked. Nathan did not answer. They both knew the truth. Without reinforcements, they could only delay the end. The retreat was chaos. Soldiers fell back through the streets, carrying wounded comrades and pushing civilians toward the tunnel entrances. The Vorathi pressed forward with terrible speed. They did not take cover. They did not hesitate. They simply advanced, confident that nothing could stop them. Lisa found Danny hiding behind a burning vehicle. The young private was crying but still holding his weapon. "On your feet, soldier," she said. "We're not done yet." "They killed everyone," Danny whispered. "My whole squad, everyone." Lisa pulled him up by his armor. "Then we make them pay for it. But not here. We fall back to the tunnels. We survive. Understand?" Danny wiped his eyes and nodded. The last human soldiers entered the tunnels as the sun set over the burning outpost. Nathan stood at the entrance with a detonator in his hand. Behind him, 300 survivors waited in the darkness. Ahead of him, A Vorathi army celebrated their easy victory. He pressed the button. The tunnel entrance collapsed in a mountain of rock and metal dot in orbit. Warlord Kethril watched the destruction with satisfaction. His scales rippled with pleasure as his officers reported the human casualties. The soft creatures had fought harder than expected, but the result was never in doubt. They were prey. His people were predators. The natural order had been confirmed. "My lord," said one of his officers, "some humans escaped into the underground tunnels. Should we send hunting parties?" Kethril made a sound that passed for laughter among his kind. "Let them hide in their holes. They will starve or surrender. Either way, they are finished." He turned to his communications officer. "Open a channel to the human homeworld. I wish to speak to their leaders." The message was broadcast across all human frequencies. Kethril's image appeared on screens throughout Earth and every human colony. "Creatures of Earth," he said, his voice dripping with contempt. "Your children on Vareth 7 have fallen. Your soldiers broke like dry sticks. Your technology is primitive. Your bodies are weak. You have no claws, no armor, no strength. You are prey, and my people are hunters." He leaned closer to the camera. "Submit now. Surrender your worlds. Serve the Vorathi Dominion, and some of you may live. Resist, and we will harvest your species. You have one rotation of your planet to decide. Choose wisely, little prey." The transmission ended. On Earth, billions of people watched in silence. Fear spread through cities and towns. Parents held their children. Leaders gathered in emergency meetings. Some talked of surrender. Some talked of negotiation. But in military bases across human space, men and women who had spent their lives learning war looked at each other with different expressions. Not fear. Not panic. Anger. In the tunnels beneath Outpost Kestrel, Colonel Nathan Price gathered his survivors. They were wounded, exhausted, and outnumbered beyond hope. But they were still alive. "We hold," he said. "We survive. And when our people come, and they will come, we make sure there's something left to save." Lisa checked her ammunition. Danny gripped his rifle with hands that no longer shook. Above them, the Vorathi celebrated. They did not know what was coming. Admiral Patricia Cole had served the United Terran Defense Fleet for 40 years. She had fought pirates in the asteroid belts. She had led rescue missions in hostile space. She had buried more friends than she could count. Nothing had prepared her for watching an alien warlord call humanity prey on live broadcast. She stood in the war room of Earth Command, surrounded by generals, politicians, and intelligence officers. The room was silent after the Vorathi message ended. "They want an answer," said Secretary Grant, a thin man with nervous hands. "Perhaps we should consider—" "Consider what?" Patricia interrupted. "Surrender? Slavery? We need to be realistic, Admiral. Our fleet is scattered. Our nearest ships are days away from Vareth 7. The Vorathi have superior numbers." Patricia walked to the tactical display. It showed the position of every human warship in known space. The Secretary was right. They were spread thin. But the Secretary was also looking at the wrong thing. How many active military personnel do we have across all human territories? She asked. General Howard Blake, a broad man with gray hair and scars on his face, pulled up the numbers. Approximately 2 million active duty. Another 4 million in reserves. And how many veterans? Retired soldiers, former Marines, anyone with combat experience? Blake checked again. His eyebrows rose. Over 20 million registered veterans with combat certifications still active. Patricia nodded slowly. The Vorathi studied our biology. They saw soft skin and small teeth. They saw short lifespans and no natural weapons. They concluded we were weak. She turned to face the room. They did not study our history. Secretary Grant shook his head. Admiral, these are retired soldiers. Many are past combat age. Past combat age? Patricia almost smiled. Secretary, humans don't stop being dangerous because they get old. They get more dangerous. Every year of survival is another year of learning how to fight, how to kill, how to win. She pressed a button on her console. Her voice broadcast across every military frequency in human space. This is Admiral Patricia Cole. 24 hours ago, the Varathi Dominion attacked Outpost Kestrel. They killed our people. They called us prey. They gave us 1 day to surrender. She paused. I am calling all veterans with combat experience. If you can still hold a weapon, we need you. If you can still fly a ship, we need you. Report to your nearest military installation immediately. We're going to bring our people home. The response came faster than anyone expected. In New Chicago, a 60-year-old man named Victor Dunn heard the call. He was watering his garden when the broadcast played on his outdoor speakers. His hands froze. The watering can dropped to the ground. Victor had spent 30 years in special forces. He had fought in the Mars Uprising, the Colony Wars, and a dozen smaller conflicts that never made the news. He had retired 5 years ago after losing his son in a Varathi border raid. He had tried to leave violence behind, but his hands remembered how to kill. And his heart remembered his son. He walked inside, opened a locked cabinet, and pulled out his old combat armor. It still fit. He had made sure it would always fit. By the time he reached the military base, there was already a line. Hundreds of men and women, some young, many old, all with the same look in their eyes. Victor took his place among them. Hell of a reunion, said the woman next to him. She was missing her left arm below the elbow. The empty sleeve was pinned to her shoulder. You sure you want to be here? Victor asked. She looked at him with hard eyes. My daughter is on Varith 7. You want to tell me I can't go? Victor shook his head. No, ma'am. I do not. Across human space, the same scene played out. Retired pilots returned to their fighters. Former engineers reported to shipyards. Old sergeants who had trained generations of soldiers picked up rifles again. They came with gray hair and old wounds and memories of every friend they had lost. They came angry. Captain Lena. Marsh watched from the bridge of the assault carrier USS Defiance as transport ships docked one after another. Each one brought more veterans, more weapons, more people who refused to be called prey. How many do we have now? She asked her first officer. 12,000 combat veterans on board. Another 8,000 on support ships. And more arriving every hour. Lena shook her head in amazement. Command gave us 3 days to assemble a response force. We did it in 18 hours. Our first officer, a young man named Ben Carter, looked concerned. Captain, many of these soldiers are older. Some haven't seen combat in decades. Are we sure they can? Lieutenant, Lena said quietly. I've served with young soldiers and old soldiers. Young soldiers are brave. They're eager. They want to prove themselves. She turned to look at the veterans moving through her ship. Old soldiers are different. They've already proven everything they need to prove. They're not here for glory. They're here because someone threatened their families, their homes, their species. She watched as Victor Dunn walked past, heading toward the armory. His face was calm. His movements were smooth. Everything about him said that he had done this 1,000 times before. Those aliens picked a fight with people who have spent their entire lives learning how to end fights, Lena said. The Varathi have no idea what's coming. The fleet assembled in orbit around Earth, 40 warships, 200 support vessels, 30,000 soldiers, most of them veterans with decades of combined experience. Admiral Cole stood on the bridge of her flagship, the UTS Relentless. She looked at the tactical display showing their destination. Vareth 7 was 3 days away at maximum speed. "The Varathi expect us to negotiate," said General Blake, who stood beside her. "Their deadline expires in 6 hours. Patricia nodded. "Then, let's send our response." She opened a channel to the Varathi frequency. On the display, the image of Warlord Kethril appeared. His yellow eyes showed surprise at the communication. "Human Commander," he said, "have you come to accept our generous terms?" Patricia looked at him for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was cold. "You called us prey. You studied our bodies and decided we were weak. That was a mistake." She leaned forward. "You should have studied our wars. You should have looked at our history. You should have seen what we do to those who threaten our children." Kethril's scales shifted in what might have been amusement. "You are prey who have forgotten their place. We will teach you." "No," Patricia said. "We're coming to teach you. And we're bringing every soldier who ever learned how to kill. Every veteran who lost friends in battle. Every parent who knows what it means to protect their young." She smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "We're coming for our people. And God help you when we arrive." She cut the transmission. The fleet jumped to hyperspace. The lesson was about to begin. The Varathi detection officer saw the human fleet first. His scales went pale with shock. "My lord. Enemy ships. 47 vessels just exited hyperspace at close range." Warlord Kethril spun toward the display. The human fleet was not where it should be. Standard military doctrine required ships to exit hyperspace at safe distances, far from planetary gravity wells, far from enemy weapons. The humans had ignored all of this. They had jumped directly into the middle of his fleet. It was suicide. It was madness. It was working. "All ships, engage!" Kethril roared. "Destroy them." But the human fleet was already moving. Admiral Patricia Cole watched from the bridge of the Relentless as her ships tore into the Varathi formation. The aliens had arranged their vessels in perfect defensive patterns, exactly as their military doctrine required. They had positioned their strongest ships at the front, their command vessels in the center, and their support ships at the rear. Patricia had spent decades fighting human enemies. She knew how to break formations. She knew how to create chaos. And she knew that the best way to win a battle was to fight a completely different battle than the one your enemy expected. "All fighter wings, ignore the battleships," she ordered. "Go straight for the command vessel. Don't stop for anything." Captain Lena Marsh heard the order in her cockpit. She pushed her fighter to maximum speed, leading her squadron through a storm of enemy fire. Varathi ships tried to intercept them, but they were too slow to adjust. They had expected the humans to fight by the rules. There were no rules. "Stay on my wing," Lena shouted to her pilots. "We punched through together." The command vessel grew larger in her view screen. It was a massive ship, covered in weapons and armor. Under normal circumstances, attacking it directly would be stupid. But normal circumstances involved careful planning and measured risks. This was not that kind of fight. Lena's squadron launched their missiles at point-blank range. The explosions ripped through the command vessel shields. Secondary explosions followed as critical systems failed. On the bridge of his crippled ship, Kethril felt the floor shake beneath his feet. "Impossible," he whispered on the surface of Vareth 7. Master Sergeant Victor Dunn waited in the drop pod with 19 other veterans. They were older than typical assault troops. Some had gray hair. Some had old scars from battles fought decades ago. None of them showed fear. 30 seconds to drop," announced the pilot. Victor checked his weapon one more time. The rifle was an older model, the same type he had carried during the colony wars. He had turned down the newer equipment. He knew this weapon. He trusted this weapon. "Listen up," he said to his squad. "We've got survivors in those tunnels. Soldiers and civilians who have been fighting for 6 days against impossible odds. Our job is simple. We get them out. Anyone who tries to stop us dies. Questions? No questions. Just nods." These were not young soldiers who needed speeches. These were killers who had made peace with death long ago. "Dropping now," said the pilot. The pod fell from the sky like a meteor dot on the ground. The Varathi defenders saw the pods coming. They opened fire with anti-aircraft weapons, destroying some pods before they landed. But hundreds more got through. The pods slammed into the surface with bone-shaking impacts, and veteran soldiers came pouring out. The Varathi had fought the young garrison of Outpost Kestrel. Those soldiers had been brave, but inexperienced. They had made mistakes. They had hesitated. The veterans did not hesitate. Victor's squad moved through the ruins of the outpost with deadly efficiency. Every corner was cleared. Every door was checked. Every Varathi who crossed their path died before they could raise their weapons. "Contact left," shouted one of his soldiers. Victor was already firing. 3 Varathi fell. A 4th tried to run. Victor's shot took it in the back of the head. "Keep moving," he ordered. The Varathi ground commander watched in disbelief as his forces crumbled. These humans were different from the ones he had fought before. They moved differently. They shot better. They showed no fear, no hesitation, no mercy. "What are they?" he demanded. "These are not the same creatures." His advisor, one of the few who had survived the tunnel fighting, spoke quietly. "These are their elders, Commander. They're experienced warriors. The ones who have killed many times before." The commander stared at him. "Elders? They send their old ones to fight." "Among humans, Commander, age does not mean weakness. It means survival. Every year, a human lives is another year of learning to kill." The commander felt something cold spread through his body. It was an unfamiliar sensation. It took him several seconds to recognize it as terror. Victor's squad reached the collapsed tunnel entrance. Behind them, the remains of the Varathi Defense Force were in full retreat. Above them, the Varathi fleet was burning. "Engineers, get this entrance open." Victor shouted. The combat engineers went to work, setting controlled charges to clear the rubble. The ground shook as rocks fell away. A dark opening appeared. Victor raised his communication device. "Outpost Kestrel survivors, this is Master Sergeant Victor Dunn of the Terran Defense Force. We are at the main tunnel entrance. Respond if you can hear me." Static. Then a voice. Tired, hoarse, but alive. "This is Colonel Nathan Price. We read you, Sergeant. We're coming up." Victor felt something release in his chest. He had not realized how tightly he had been holding on to hope. "Copy that, Colonel. We'll be waiting." The survivors emerged from the tunnels in small groups. Soldiers helping wounded comrades. Civilians carrying children. All of them blinking in the unfamiliar light of day. Danny Vaughn walked out supporting Ambassador Claire Whitmore, who had twisted her ankle in the final climb. He looked up at the sky and saw human ships where Varathi ships had been. "We made it," he whispered. "We actually made it." Sergeant Lisa Brennan was the last soldier out. She counted heads as her people passed, making sure no one was left behind. When she reached Victor, she snapped a salute. "Sergeant Lisa Brennan, sir. Thank you for coming." Victor returned the salute. "Hell of a fight you put up, Sergeant." Hell of a fight. In orbit, the last Varathi ships were surrendering or fleeing. Warlord Kethral's command vessel drifted helplessly, its engines destroyed, its weapons silent. Patricia Cole watched it on her display with cold satisfaction. "Send a boarding party," she ordered. "I want that warlord alive." The battle was over. The war had just begun. Veteran Solus had spent 40 cycles studying species across the galaxy. He had written papers on the warrior cultures of the Draxan, analyzed the hive mind tactics of the Skarathi, and documented the ancient military traditions of 100 different worlds. He considered himself an expert on warfare and those who waged it, but he had never paid much attention to humans. They were a young species, barely 3 cycles into their membership with the Galactic Assembly. They came from a small world on the outer edge of known space. Their technology was decent but unremarkable. Their fleet was tiny compared to the great powers. They seemed more interested in trade and exploration than conquest at diplomatic functions. Veteran often watched them from across the room. They smiled too much. They laughed too loud. They touched each other constantly, putting hands on shoulders and embracing for no apparent reason. They brought images of their families to show anyone who would look. They talked about food and weather and something called sports with the same passion that other species reserve for. Matters of state. They seemed soft, emotional, weak. So, when the Devour Collective declared war on the Galactic Assembly, Veteran did not expect humanity to matter. The Devourers were ancient. They had swept across 1,000 worlds, consuming everything in their path. They did not negotiate. They did not take prisoners. They simply arrived, stripped a world of all resources in life, and moved on to the next. For 10,000 cycles, they had stayed in distant regions of the galaxy. But now they were hungry again, and they had turned their eyes toward assembly space. The announcement came during a full session of the High Council. Veteran was there, recording the event for his research. He watched as species after species responded to the news. The Volanthi, with their massive warships, immediately began withdrawing their forces to protect their home systems. The Krixtal, known for their cunning, started negotiating secret deals to be spared. The Thornaki simply fled, abandoning their colonies without a fight. Within hours, half the assembly had either surrendered or run away. It was exactly what Veteran expected. The Devourers were too powerful. Fighting them was suicide. The smart move was to hide and hope they grew bored. Then the human ambassador stood up. Her name was Catherine Price. She was small, even by human standards. She had gray in her hair and lines on her face that showed her age. She did not look like a warrior. She did not look like anyone important at all. But when she spoke, the entire chamber went silent. "The United Earth government will not surrender," she said. Her voice was calm and steady. "We will not run. We will not hide. We will fight." Veteran heard several delegates laugh. The Volanthi ambassador shook his head with something like pity. The human fleet was barely a fraction of what the Devourers commanded. This was not bravery. This was stupidity. High Counselor Zethara, an ancient being who had led the assembly for centuries, looked at the human with confusion. "Ambassador Price," she said, "your courage is noted. But surely you understand the situation. The Devourers cannot be defeated. Your fleet would be destroyed in the first engagement." Ambassador Price smiled. It was a strange smile, Veteran thought. There was no fear in it. No doubt. "High Counselor," she said, "with respect, you do not know what humans are capable of. You have seen us at peace. You have not seen us at war. We have read your history," another delegate called out. "You fight among yourselves constantly. Surely this proves you are not suited for." "It proves," Ambassador Price interrupted, "that we have been practicing." The chamber fell silent again. That night, Veteran requested assignment as an observer aboard a human vessel. He told the council it was for research purposes, to document how a minor species behaved in the face of certain death. But the truth was simpler than that. He was curious. He wanted to understand why these soft, smiling creatures had chosen to die. 2 days later, he boarded the human carrier Endurance. The ship was not impressive. It was functional, practical, built for purpose rather than display. The corridors were narrow. The lighting was harsh. Everything smelled strange, like metal and recycled air and something organic that Veteran could not identify. Commander Daniel Hayes met him at the docking bay. He was a tall man with short dark hair and eyes that seemed to look right through Veteran. He shook Veteran's hand, a human custom that involved gripping another being's appendage and moving it up and down. "Welcome aboard," Hayes said. "I understand you're here to watch us lose." Veteran was startled by the directness. "I am here to observe," he said carefully, "to document your actions for the historical record." Hayes smiled. It was the same smile Ambassador Price had worn. "Good," he said. "Make sure you get it all down. I want the galaxy to remember what happens next." "What has happened next?" Veteran asked. Hayes looked at him for a long moment. Then he turned and began walking down the corridor. "Come with me," he said. "I'll show you something." He led Veteran to an observation deck near the front of the ship. Through the wide windows, Veteran could see the stars stretching out into infinity. It was beautiful in a cold and empty way. "Do you know why the Devourers always win?" Hayes asked. "Because they are more powerful," Veteran said. "They have more ships, more weapons, more—" "No," Hayes said. "They win because everyone gives up before the fight is over. They win because people look at the odds and decide it isn't worth it. They win because the galaxy has forgotten what it means to really fight." He turned to face Veteran. "Humans don't know how to give up. It's not in our nature. We fight when we're outnumbered. We fight when we're outgunned. We fight when there's no hope left at all. And sometimes, just sometimes, that's enough to change everything." Veteran did not know what to say. He looked out at the stars, at the vast darkness that held so much death and destruction, and for the first time, he wondered if maybe he had underestimated humanity. The Earth system was dying. Veteran could see it from the observation deck as the Coalition fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel. The planet below had once been green and blue, a garden world home to 3 million Verati civilians. Now great patches of brown and black scarred its surface. Smoke rose from burning cities. The Devourers had already begun their harvest around the planet. 24 Devourer warships waited like predators guarding their kill. The Coalition fleet was larger. 40 ships from 6 different species had answered the call. But Veteran saw the fear in the alien commanders' eyes as they gathered for the strategy meeting. He saw them calculating the losses they would suffer. He saw them looking for reasons to retreat. Admiral Lexon of the Volanti spoke first. He was an old soldier, respected across the galaxy, and his words carried weight. "The Devourers have fortified their position well," he said. "Our forces can defeat them, but at significant cost. I recommend we withdraw and regroup. The Vara system is already lost. We should not waste ships trying to save the dead." Several commanders nodded in agreement. The logic was sound. Militarily, strategically, it made perfect sense. Then Commander Hayes spoke. "There are still people alive down there." The room went quiet. Admiral Vexon looked at the human with confusion. "I beg your pardon? Our sensors are picking up life signs," Hayes said. "Hundreds of thousands of Verati are still alive on that planet. They're hiding, running, trying to survive. And you want to leave them behind." "Commander," Dexon said patiently, "I understand your concern, but those people are beyond saving. The Devourers will finish their harvest within days regardless of what we do. Sacrificing our fleet will not change that." Hayes stood up. He was not a tall man, not physically impressive in any way, but something in his eyes made even Admiral Dexon take a step back. Then we'll buy them days, Hayes said. We'll evacuate who we can. We'll fight for every hour, every minute, every second. Because that's what those people deserve. You would throw away your ships for strangers? Another commander asked. For people you have never met? Hayes looked around the room at all the alien faces watching him. Yes, he said simply. That's what humans do. The coalition commanders argued for another hour. In the end, most of them agreed to support a limited engagement. Not because they believed it would work, but because they were ashamed to do less than the humans were willing to do. The battle began at dawn. Vethrin watched from the Endurance's command center as the human fleet pushed forward into the heart of the Devourer formation. They were not cautious. They were not careful. They threw themselves at the enemy with a fury that made Vethrin's blood run cold. Lieutenant Torres worked the tactical station like an artist, finding gaps in the enemy lines and exploiting them ruthlessly. She directed fire with deadly precision, calling out targets faster than Vethrin could follow. But the real battle was happening on the ground. Captain Ryan Cole led the ground forces. His mission was simple and impossible. Land on the planet, find survivors, and get them to the evacuation ships. All while Devour hunting parties roamed the surface, killing everything that moved. Vethrin listened to the communications as Cole's soldiers fought their way through the ruins of Virati cities. He heard gunfire and explosions. He heard screaming. He heard humans calling out to each other, coordinating their movements, refusing to leave anyone behind. He heard Captain Cole's voice, steady and calm, even as death closed in around him. We found a group of survivors, Cole reported. About 200 civilians hiding in a collapsed building. Devourers are closing in. We're going to hold this position. Captain, Hayes said, you're surrounded. If you stay, you won't make it out. There was a pause. Then Cole's voice came through, warm with something that sounded almost like peace. Then we don't make it out, sir. But these people do. That's the job. Hayes closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, they were hard as stone. Understood, Captain. Give them hell. Yes, sir. Cole out. Vethrin watched the battle unfold on the tactical display. He watched as Cole's unit formed a defensive circle around the Virati civilians. He watched as they held their ground against wave after wave of Devourer soldiers. He watched as they fell, one by one, and the others closed ranks to fill the gaps. It took 4 hours for the evacuation shuttles to reach them. In that time, 60 human soldiers died defending strangers they had never met, would never know, would never receive thanks from. When the shuttles finally lifted off, carrying 200 Virati civilians to safety, only 8 of Cole's soldiers were still alive. Cole was not among them. The battle in space was just as brutal. 3 human ships were destroyed. 2 more were crippled. But they held the line long enough to evacuate nearly 400,000 civilians from the planet below. When it was over, the Devourers pulled back to regroup. They had never faced resistance like this. They had never seen an enemy so willing to die. That night, Vethrin found Commander Hayes alone in his quarters. The human was sitting in darkness, staring at a photograph of his family. I am sorry about Captain Cole, Vethrin said. Hayes nodded slowly. He knew what he was doing. They all did. They chose it. Why? Vethrin asked. The question that had been burning in him since he first boarded this ship. Why do humans sacrifice themselves for others? What do you gain from it? Hayes looked at him for a long time. His eyes were red, tired, filled with grief, but also with something else, something that looked like fire. We don't gain anything, he said. That's not why we do it. We do it because we can't live with ourselves if we don't. We do it because when we see someone suffering, something inside us breaks unless we try to help. He held up the photograph. A woman and 2 children smiled out from the image. If my family was trapped on that planet, I would want someone to fight for them. So I fight for everyone else's family too. That's all it is. That's the whole secret. Vethrin thought about the soldiers who had died today. 60 lives ended. For strangers. And he finally began to understand why the stars might have reason to tremble.